Hello everyone, my name is Hubert and welcome to the Teach Me channel. Today we are going to talk about communicable diseases. This is a part of GCSE biology in most courses, and this is something that I would like to cover with you today. So first of all, there are several types of pathogens. There are several pathogens. Now, what is a pathogen? Pathogen is a microorganism that can cause a disease. I'm going to put that down for you here. Organism that can cause disease. This is quite an important definition, which is why I wrote it down here for you. And there are several types of pathogens. Pathogens can affect both animals and plants. Now, as I already said, there are several types of pathogens, and we will quickly go over them, and I will explain to you what they are and throw in some couple interesting facts along the way. So let's get started. First of all, the most common, the most well-known pathogen is probably bacteria. And this is the first one we will cover today. Bacteria. Now, bacteria are very small single cells. And these single cells, these bacteria, reproduce very rapidly. Some of those bacteria can reproduce, as rapidly as they can double their size in 20 minutes, which is super fast. I mean, if you think about it, if we have 4 bacteria, then after 20 minutes you have 8 bacteria. After next 20 minutes you have 16 bacteria. After that you have 32. You can see how they can grow to crazy huge numbers. So they reproduce rapidly. Rapid growth. Now, what is the problem with bacteria? Some pathogenic bacteria that can cause disease. How do they cause the disease? Well, they produce toxins. Toxins are, of course, as the name suggests, toxic to our body, and they're essentially harmful. And these toxins can lead to cell and tissue damage in our body, which in turn can make us feel ill. So this isn't entirely true, because in reality it is our body's response to that damage that makes us ill. But as far as GCSE is concerned, it is those toxins that can make us ill. So that is it about bacteria. Now we can move on to the next type of pathogen, which is virus, which you probably heard of as well. Virus. Now, virus, this is important. Virus is not a cell. It is not a cell. Viruses are very small. They are about 1/100th of the size of a bacteria. And why are they so small? Well, because they have an ability to hijack a cell or bacterial machinery in order to replicate themselves. I will show you how this works. So they can hijack cell or bacteria. And they do this in such a way. So first we have a little virus here. They look something like this. And that virus attaches itself on a cell membrane. And here we have our virus. And what that virus do is it has a strand of DNA inside it, or RNA in most cases actually. And they inject this genetic information, they inject that genetic information inside a cell membrane or inside a bacterium, where that little genetic code what it does is it fuses. So here we have a nucleus, and it fuses with the rest of the host DNA, the rest of the cell's DNA. So here we have loads of cells' DNA, and this strand of genetic code fuses itself with the cell DNA, where it is able to hijack the cell and make the cell produce more of the virus, produce replicas of the virus that has infected it. So what happens next? What happens next is the cell starts producing lots of these little guys, starts producing lots of these little viruses, the same viruses, it's identical replica. And then those viruses exit the cell. They exit the cell. However, what they do, as they all come out of the cell, they rupture. They break the cell membrane, and thereby they kill the cell. And now you have lots of these viruses, thousands upon thousands of them, that can go on and infect more cells. And because the cells are getting killed, we get cell damage. Sorry, I'm just going to readjust the paper. So we get cell damage where our body starts responding to that cell damage, and this is what makes us sick when it comes to viruses. So this basically covers viruses and bacteria. Now we will move on to more complicated pathogens. So we will move on to pathogens called Protists. Now, Protists are mostly single cells, not always, but they are mostly single cells. Mostly single cells. And they are all eukaryotes. Which means they have nucleus, they have all these features, they have nucleus, they have mitochondria, they have all the features that eukaryotic cells would have. Whereas bacteria are, of course, prokaryotes, so they are missing some of those features. Now, these protists, these little organisms, are often acting as parasites. They often act as parasites where they enter a human body and then they live off the resources. They exploit the human body. They take the resources from the body, and in a process they are damaging the body, and they are very, very tricky to treat. They are tricky. Why? Because they can exist in different states, and they often have very complex life cycles. One example of such a disease is, of course, malaria. And malaria can exist in blood cells, or it can actually exist in liver cells. Which is, so I'm going to write it down here. And this helps the organism to avoid immune system. So this makes malaria a fairly tricky disease to treat. So that covers the protists, and now we can move on to the final pathogen that we're going to cover today, which is fungi. You probably have heard of fungi before. Fungi can be single cells, or they can be multicellular. Now, for example, one example of fungi is yeast. And yeast is a single cell. Whereas another example of a fungus is trichophyton. And that fungus actually is a lot of cells that are connected in these hair-like structures. These hair-like structures, which are called hyphae. I'm going to write it down for you here. So, now, fungi can be harmful, but in some cases they can actually be useful. Now, yeast can cause disease. It can cause various skin problems and things like that. However, yeast can also be used to make things such as bread, or it can even be used to make beer. So, whereas trichophyton, for example, is mostly harmful, trichophyton is a fungus that can cause athlete's foot. Now, how it does it? The hyphae that form the trichophyton fungus can invade human skin. They can penetrate human skin, and that allows it to attach onto the foot, and it allows them to start growing and start causing harm. Now, so this is a quick rundown of the main pathogens that human body has to deal with. However, now we're going to quickly talk about how these pathogens can spread, because they can spread in many different ways. So, pathogens can spread in many different ways. First such way is water. Pathogens can be waterborne. One such example is cholera. Now, what it means is that if somebody was to drink water that contains this pathogen, then they would get sick. So, this is one way various pathogens throughout history has decimated large populations. Now, another very dangerous way pathogens can spread is through air. Pathogens can spread through air. Very common one, for example, is virus, the influenza virus. What does influenza do? Influenza essentially is a virus that causes flu. And as you know, it can be spread by coughing, sneezing, etc. So, for example, if we have this guy here who has a flu and is coughing, what happens? As he coughs, he releases these tiny droplets which contain the virus. And he can cough on various items that people are going to later touch, or these droplets can actually be directly breathed in by somebody else. And that person, unfortunately, would get sick. So this is another way the pathogens can spread. And another big way that pathogens can do this is by direct contact. Direct contact. I'm going to underline these for you. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that pathogen can spread by coming into contact with human skin. It can, for example, one very good example is athlete's foot. For example, if somebody with athlete's foot had a shower barefoot or stepped on a surface barefoot, then they would leave all these athlete's foot fungi. I'm going to draw a foot here. They would leave all these athlete's foot fungi. And if anyone else was to step in the same area, then the chances would be that that person would unfortunately get athlete's foot. So this is a very quick rundown of the pathogens and what kind of pathogens are out there and how they spread. So thank you for listening, and if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to stay up to date with daily videos on sciences, on GCSE and A-level, if you want to stay up to date with maths videos on GCSE level, as well as some university biomedical sciences videos, please press the subscribe button below. Thank you again, and see you next time.